Jay Morrison is the biggest con man in the real estate influencer space. There are over 15,000 victims of his lies and incompetence.
I'm an influencer, but I'm not an influencer.
Yeah.
I'm a real estate guy, but I'm not a real estate guy.
He raised money and claimed his critics were haters, but recently his haters were proven right.
Right from the get-go, analyzing his speech, something feels off. Even during the interview, the stuff he is saying makes no sense, so what are you then? Using other people's money to buy a city and then flip it doesn't sound like the brightest idea. And from the get-go, it sounds unsustainable.
I'm gonna speak up because I'm driving and I want to be heard clearly, so I get this point out. My name is Tardo Felix. I am in the Army National Guard in the state of South Carolina. I'm a veteran. I've served my country for over 12 years. Currently a federal technician, also on the civilian side. Recently came back from Kuwait, my second deployment. I'm gonna express my disappointment and really disbelief in Jay Morrison and the Tulsa Real Estate Fund. Not only did I put money into the fund, I actually spoke up on behalf of this black man who invoked the ancestors, Marcus Garvey, people who lost their lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Today, we will discuss the Tulsa Real Estate Fund created and operated by Jay Morrison. We're talking about him today, a man who, single-handedly, has dug his own grave. We will delve into his case and dissect a case of $11.7 million theft, the modus operandi of this big-time con artist. Let's talk a bit about his corporate failures, and at the same time, how he's maneuvered over time. Despite all that's happened, he still holds a gram of credibility in his field and with the people he deals with, which is quite fascinating. Did you know that during the Tulsa incident, this man made off with approximately $11.7 million stolen? But how did he manage to pull this off? Well, as we saw at the outset, his intention was to buy Tulsa and turn it into a paradise for his community. His goal was even to create a place for his community to have their legacy, something called the Legacy Center at the Black House, or should I say the Black House fiasco. But how did he manage to garner that support? How did no one catch on? Well, it's not that they didn't catch on. Some experts warned of the downfall of his project before it even launched, not where he held on to finance it, and it's through the Black Wall Street. The incident is charged as the white supremacist attack against the burgeoning Greenwood community during the 1920s, an incident that should never be forgotten. What does this have to do with Jay Morrison? Well, theoretically, almost nothing. He is doing what a con man does, and that is preying on people's emotions to garner cash from them. That is why he named his fund the Tulsa Real Estate Fund. This is the premise he used to sway the public and convince them of his project, convincing his community to donate absurd amounts of money to buy an entire city and reclaim the image of their ancestors. But someone like this doesn't reach this level where he is, just out of thin air. To be able to finance this project and make them believe in him, he had to build an image. While his Tulsa project, in essence, is his career, it's not solely this that solidifies him. There's a pattern among those who claim to teach you how to become rich or a millionaire, and that's that they all have a tragic past. Story reminiscent of the pursuit of happiness, which elevates people's image to make them icons of a social movement. Jay Morrison was one of them. Besides having been a criminal for several years, specifically 12 years ago, he started in real estate. Or at least, that's what's supposedly believed. And we can also find some old videos where he engaged in these acts and had this job.
Hey, it's Jay, Mr. Real Estate Morrison, and I'm going to be showing my client, Mo Wilkerson, first-round draft pick of the New York Jets, a couple properties in New Jersey.
There we can see him after rehabilitation, beginning the recovery of his social regeneration. A rather smooth ascent, where we could find him conducting several sessions to help people become millionaires. This is where he started to build a clean image. But was he really a real estate seller or just someone who stumbled into it? By 2016, he released 2 books giving advice on how to own your own home, a book appealing to the African American community about issues like justice and generational wealth. Reaching high points in his social image, he became a real estate celebrity for several
Tulsa Real Estate Fund. They say if you build it, they will come. Well, our time is here. We've built the economic vehicle for the revitalization of the earth.
years, gaining fame and offering advice on getting rich, when clearly he wasn't rich himself. His constant support for uplifting his community was gaining him support. We weren't seeing anything out of the ordinary. He was a man amassing wealth more and more, and this was when he was about to present a fairly big project by that time. The Tulsa Real Estate Fund Conference. This conference, held in 2017, was uploaded on YouTube around July 20th, where the first proposals were seen. Remember that until this point, his influence was quite limited. It is from here that we know much more and in depth about what was proposed, and we will analyze how all this has been falling apart until this moment. The Great Tulsa Real Estate Fund Project.
Unsafe or even vacant for extended periods of time, mainly due to practices such as redlining, mortgage discrimination, blockbusting, deindustrialization, and economic disinvestment from the public and private sector. In addition, studies show that vacant properties in the neighborhood are correlated to increased violence and capital from a pool of socially conscious investors. Then search for quality real estate investment opportunities in economically depressed neighborhoods, purchasing properties to be fixed up and either sold or held onto for rental income. As the properties make payments and/or increase in value, the fund participants as co-owners of the portfolio of investments will receive an 8% preferred return and a 50-50 split of the remaining profits with the fund managers. In addition to receiving the return on their capital, the Tulsa Fund real estate investor will have had the opportunity to create jobs in their community, participate in neighborhood improvements, positively impact local public spending, all the while creating a new legacy of ownership.
The proposal sounded pretty good. Give $500 to obtain property and build generational wealth through real estate. The Tulsa Real Estate was supposed to be the catalyst to help his community gain ownership in real estate in their community while creating jobs. By doing this, they said it would give you an 8% return on your money that was invested and a 50-50 split on the remaining profits. In other words, a Ponzi scheme. When a project of this nature appeals so much to the public, you have to realize that it is clear that the man is not a millionaire to be able to invest. Because if he did, why would he start a crowdfunding site and guarantee everybody the same split in profits when everybody doesn't donate the same amount of money? From this statement alone, you start to realize he is attempting to do something that doesn't make sense. And as the kids like to say, the math ain't mathing on these calculations, but he was able to make so many people believe it could happen when in actuality it could not. But all of this is more than obvious today in 2024. Why didn't more people notice back in 2018? Maybe it's the same reason why many people fell for scams like the ones Logan Paul did with CryptoZoo. Nobody was prepared or accustomed, but even though it was quite obvious, he was ingenious in presenting it and deceived his audience to acquire their money. The robbery strategy. He begins by discussing the historical remembrance of the Tulsa, Oklahoma Black Wall Street.
You know, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which we're going to talk about in a little bit later, we know that a thriving economy was built, but was torched when some of the Jim Crow tactics on how to do justice was met with opposition. We know that the summer of 1919, these people who were migrating received some of the bloodiest.
By speaking about the truth and injustice of those times to appeal to the interest of the guests and the people present. During the first half hour, Jay uses speakers to back up why the Tulsa Real Estate Fund is needed in the community. And of course, Jay has a video of himself speaking about his own personal story appealing to pity, and obviously his growth. Here he begins to introduce aspects such as the need for his community to work towards achieving its identity and investing in its own areas for real estate. A very clever trick called empowerment that has been used in Ponzi schemes for years. The feeling that you have an opportunity in a larger mechanism to help create a utopian place for your community.
About this, but know that it's not just about you profiting. It's not a flippant scheme where it's intended to just solely profit you. There's nothing wrong with profit. We have a responsibility to invest in what's ours. These communities, these people, they belong to us. They're our family, they're our neighbors. If they're to have options, we have to create them.
This way, Jay and his team introduce that responsibility, thus justifying the fact that we don't need investors, and even though we could buy it ourselves, it's our duty as a community to make it happen. Sounds pretty nice in principle and takes advantage of a narrative that has been built up over the years. But there are also sureties for the audience themselves.
This Jobs Act, and we extend President Obama's legacy through the Tulsa Real Estate Fund by launching this financial vehicle, which allows anyone from any community, but allows the extension of this 6-lane highway for our community to be able to invest into real estate assets that own businesses. It could be real estate land that owns agriculture and farming. It could be real estate
fund investors. The Black House is officially for sale. It is listed on this Instagram page as of today. And we know that the road has finally come to an end. The $11.7 million that Jay Morrison raised is now almost all gone. Recently, he said he was liquidating the fund. And so we knew that this would be the next step. He's already refinanced this building, took out $1.5 million to cover his management fees and excessive losses in terms of operating
assets that are schools, real estate assets that are hospitals, real estate assets or anything that we need within our community. We can now own it, acquire it, benefit from it, and profit from it together. It allows that the everyday investor can invest as little as $500 and be an equity owner in our fund. Get an 8% per
shock to anyone, to be honest. I'm sure Dr. Boyce
for return and their prorated share of 50% of the profits. So the maximum investment is $50 million.
In the Black House, and now the fund is about to be bankrupt.
And the minimum investment is $500. But when we look at
This statement perhaps sounds one of the most forced, as offering a profit shows their own fear that they won't be believed. But giving an 8% return to people with an investment probability of $500 to $50 million sounds unsustainable over time, and already from this point it sounded bad. But in his interviews, when you listen closely, the information or math regarding how he plans to invest and compensate investors.
It's something that a financial advisor actually does. If you look at the financial statements, then you would have known, not yesterday, not 6 months ago, not 2 years ago, but on year one, you can look at the financial statements and the documents.
Does not seem to add or make sense when it comes to real estate.
I wanted to channel positive energy towards something I believed in. And I believed in the vision of the Tulsa Real Estate Fund. I did not ultimately believe in the visionary. And so here we are, 6 years later, and not only is the building for sale, but the fund is liquidating, according to the 53 out of 15,000 investors that attended.
As time progressed, every investor in the Tulsa Real Estate Fund started to realize that Jay Morrison was not making the smart investments or using the money correctly like he said he would. During COVID, one of the best markets to buy real estate for pennies on the dollar, Jay Morrison made no transactions for the Tulsa Real Estate Fund when loans and land were being sold and financed for the pennies.
But why would you use cash when interest rates right here are at 0%? I want you to think about this for a second. How do you lose money in one of the greatest bubbles of all time? You had 14-year-olds creating NFTs with pictures of monkeys, and they were making millions of...
Not to mention, as all the investors started to realize now, Jay Morrison was charging observant fees and mislabeling the fund. Jay was charging $500,000 as the fund's manager, which is way above the normal 10%. Plus, Jay kept referring to the fund as an IPO, but you couldn't sell your shares like you would do with a normal IPO.
But claims from old business partners that he had.
Plus, how can a crowdfund be an IPO? Those are two different things.
Protagonist ends up in prison, but I want you to ask yourself if this is the person that should be managing other people's money.
Bro, I've been through bankruptcy. I've been divorced before. I've been a teenage dad. My daughter was born while I was in prison. I've been depressed. I made $1 million by 27 and went broke by 30.
I'm still not convinced he's ever been a millionaire. There's zero proof from a guy who's been putting out videos on the internet for a decade. The only time.
An historical IPO happening on June 1st, initial public offering. For the last 2.5 years, I've been very focused, and for 4 years from inception of concept, I've been focused on creating a real estate investment fund. It's what you can afford to lose, we say. Not that we plan on losing anything, but as a good steward and fiduciary and responsible fund manager, we have to disclose that and say that to our audience. But again, my name's on this, my face is on this, so I got to do the best, to keep my name good in these streets.
I also saw several years ago that the NFL Players Association issued a warning to its players about the fund and raising some concerns.
These kinds of statements, aside from any opinion, feel forced. But let's not talk about assumptions. Let's talk with facts. What happened to his project after all that presentation? During the pandemic, he was seen justifying his company's work.
When he starts the fund, he's currently in personal Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
This due to certain accusations of fraud. It has been reported that Jay's worst year of losses was in 2020, the year of the pandemic. How do you lose in the pandemic when you have $11 million to spend on real estate?
How do you lose millions of dollars? In 2020, he lost one. His biggest losing year was in 2020 when the market boomed. Then he turned around and he lost in 2021. He turned around and lost $1.2 million.
The fall of the foundation. By the year 2020, things were getting heavy. We can find articles like this. They began to accuse him of misusing the fund's money. All of this had been brewing since 2020, with many strong accusations. And the claims kept building up, not to mention Jay Morrison's wife and her podcast. Reports are stating she financially benefited from the purchase of the Legacy Center building because she was able to record her podcast there. They are saying allegedly for free. When the building was charging others for podcast time and space.
EJ, Jay Morrison's wife in particular, we call upon you to provide proof of payment for the 50+ hours you spent using the fund's podcasting studio to record your It's Negotiable podcast. With the going rate for studio time in Atlanta at about $75 per hour or more, we demand transparency on whether you have been using the space for free. The money is negligible, but if there is no evidence of payment, it further highlights Jay Morrison's lack of integrity and effort to make the fund successful. The people deserve answers.
God has a way of humbling people who pretend to do good, and if you are a scammer, eventually the walls will collapse around you and you will have to face the music for all the wrong you have done. This past year, Jay Morrison has gone from loved by the people to hated by the people. All scam artists will eventually run out STEM, money, and music to tap dance around their lies. In this clip below, Jay continues to tap dance around why and how he lost the $11 million that was raised for the Tulsa Real Estate Fund.
You start raising the capital and the clock starts ticking in your head that is accruing, and you got to get the money from out the bank earning points.
I was hired for Jay Morrison Academy, but when I got my paycheck stubs in, and I didn't even know this, I had was it over 70 or 40,000 something dollars? I don't remember. It was a good amount of money that was paid to me through the Tulsa Real Estate Fund, and I was hired to work for Jay Morrison Academy.
Wow.
So what he does, he takes the money from his fund and he pays his other businesses.
You're a 1% or 1% out into the market. So, you know what I'm saying? It was all that. So I'm thinking I got to get deployed fast so it's not losing, but then I got to address this concern over here. But then I got to build a board, but I still got to keep raising capital, right? Because we still got our other goal. But then I got to deploy the capital, but I still got to build a team and infrastructure. And I should have got more support early on from the beginning. I should have been intentional about that. That's on me. I had a team. We hired people I could show you, but it just should have been I should have slowed down. If I knew better now, I tell anyone doing this again, yo, slow down. Block out the noise. It was mad noise. When we went viral, raising our capital, it was so much noise. And people coming out the blue saying you this and you. I didn't expect that. I really thought white supremacists were going to come attack our fund. I didn't expect us. That was a sucker punch to me. It was oh snap! Wait, us? And I just in experience, I would have took that back.
You're saying that it could bring back potentially, right, based on estimates, those other legacy centers could bring in $2.4 million a year.
Well, they could do
and revenue. Now we know that's not profit, that's revenue.
Well, no, they would do whatever they do in their markets.
Yeah.
But as a franchisor, we would get 10% of their gross revenue, right? Just for allowing them to use our swag, our models, our systems, our process, all that. So as a franchisor, we get 10% of their gross revenue plus a franchise fee. So for us to have multiple LCs around the country, we don't got to pay the operational costs. We just get overrides off all the LCs.
In the clip from SEP 2023, before this is a meeting Jay had with some of the investors, 500 seats for 15,000 investors. So many people could not get in, and many investors did not know about the meeting. In the clip before Jay discusses franchising the Legacy Center to other cities and collecting 10% profit for them using the Legacy Center name, swag, and other things. Mind you, this was around the time WeWork was crashing and burning with all the billion-dollar funds they raised, and Jay Morrison thought he could be bigger than WeWork. A year later, and the Legacy Center has been liquidated and sold. It seems Jay was tap dancing at the Tulsa Real Estate Fund meeting just to buy himself more time. In 2021, they tried to renovate it, but it ended up being put up for sale, because even before that, all the problems were surfacing. Expenses exceeded projected revenues, and accusations of mismanagement due to constant extravagance arose, creating mistrust. This could be called the knockout blow.
Egregious violation appears to be the purchase of Jay Morrison's personal residence using the fund's money through an anonymous LLC, as well as a one-sided agreement for the adjacent 27 acres of land which he will personally own and retain for his family when the fund shuts down and cannot act on the fund's right to develop on it.
With people losing substantial sums of money through their actions. Jay has had numerous run-ins with other real estate individuals who have questioned his ability to sell real estate and do good business.
Somehow, he's always the victim, even though he's caused financial damage to 15,000 people. It must be that mysterious force always keeping him from succeeding.
Bro, we managed over $11.5 million. I spent over $1 million in transparency alone. Third-party annual audits, attorneys, technology, $1 million, bro, in transparency to show you where the money's at.
Thankfully, we were able to see the SEC reports indicating his fund losing money year after year.
Or break it down to me, why do I see the word scam?
Because you can get more views if you put scam next to my name.
He's too simple-brained to realize that the criticisms were all valid. Losing money in real estate from 2018 to 2024 was nearly impossible. Yet, he found a way.
This one now is a gentleman from the white community who's being supported by the guy that I beat in defamation, the biggest slanderer. Who's saying now the new thing is fake mogul, fake guru. I don't know. Whatever. I don't know. Honestly, my team tells me they get all frustrated. They send me these group texts. Somebody said something new about you. I don't have time to watch your videos.
He was referring to Tony the Closer, who he did not beat in defamation court. His attorneys wrongly filed court proceedings and incorrectly served Tony, leading to a technical victory, but he did not actually.
We're talking about someone who started their career as some kind of real estate celebrity, who somehow managed to garner support to create a foundation that ended up defrauding a lot of people, deceiving them with the promise of something profitable and communal, with the hope of them creating generational wealth, which turned into a massive scam. If you are looking for more stories about entrepreneurship and business, like and subscribe to the 2-Minute Entrepreneurship channel. Lastly, if you want more information, visit the TulsaRealEstateFraud.com website